is up, everybody? Welcome back to another episode of the MLB Swing for the Fences show here on the Run Pure Sports YouTube channel. It is Monday, August 19th. We're breaking down today's 9-game baseball slate, joined as usual on Mondays by JT Hayes. JT, how you doing on this Monday afternoon?
I'm doing good. I'm in the free state of Kentucky, and I couldn't be more excited to be here. It was a pretty good weekend. Had a good to see you too, Jake. Had a nice day yesterday. Good weekend and busy week. We kick it off with 9 games, and as we were talking right before, I think it's interesting because of who's going to be popular, and I just see a very wide open slate here, which gets me excited.
I'm with you. Yeah, we were talking over, the chalk pitchers and are there ways to get different? And, we didn't get into which of the different pitchers that we're into individually. But we do agree there are ways to get off the chalk at pitching. I think offensively too. I think the Royals are going to carry a lot of ownership, but I'm not 100% sold on them personally. And then I do think there are, many other ways to go, as is usually the case on a 9-game slate. And nothing, in my opinion, kind of written in stone at pitching. Michael King, the top guy, I think is a really good option. But beyond him, I do think it gets a little bit dicey. So we will break it all down, of course, on the show. Always tomorrow. We haven't even got into the slate, AP. Geez, I'm dust already. Let's, give me the hour to explain myself here, and we'll see. So,
I'm excited to hear this. I'm excited to hear this when we get there.
Yeah, we shall see.
There we go.
Don't hate the Royals or anything, but just not the only team in play tonight. But we'll do it as we always do, all 9 games, game by game, and then we'll do, of course, stacks, pitching, all that good stuff at the end of the show. Without further ado, let's get into it. First game on the slate, Cincinnati and Toronto. This one in Toronto. Blue Jays minus 170 or so behind right-handed pitcher Kevin Gausman, who's been, I would say, decidedly mediocre this year is kind of the way I would describe him. Still eating a lot of innings. He can still get his strikeouts from time to time, but has not been the same guy overall. And then he'll go up against Reds rookie Julian Aguilar, who I don't know why DK is doing this, JT, but they like pricing these MLB debutants up a little bit at pitcher. 7,200 for Aguilar seems a little bit nuts to me. I don't really think you can play him at that price point against the Blue Jays. First game on the slate here. I think this one and most of them, frankly, have at least something interesting to talk about. So curious where you're looking at with Cincinnati and Toronto here.
Yeah, so first of all, it's in Toronto, and the Blue Jays have been better offensively lately, and this hasn't been as bad a park to target this season at times. Aguilar is not in the mix for me. Not sure what the Reds are going to do with him in terms of innings. The price point, as you mentioned, is just way too high, I think, for this particular slate. The interesting play here, there's 2 interesting things here. One is, based on how the Reds have been recently, you would think that Gausman would be a little bit more popular here at just 8,800 with some pretty good props, 5.5 strikeouts juiced at 135 right now, but he's not. He's kind of in the middle of the pack here, getting, I think potentially overlooked. But the more I think about that, as bad as the Reds have been, and as much as we don't normally like to play them on the road, when you think about Gausman's tendencies and how much trouble he has holding runners on base, and this Cincinnati team that is loaded with thieves, it's an interesting spot here, I think, both sides, both the pitcher, Gausman, who I think, at least given the matchup, should be a little bit more highly owned, and then the Reds, who I think are going to go completely unowned. And I have some interest in particularly the base stealers, DC. I'm not sure what your thoughts are here, but you mentioned Gausman has been, I would go so far as to call him boom bust.
Yeah.
And there was a slate earlier this year where the Rockies were coming out of Colorado going into Toronto. Gausman was extremely popular, and it might have been his second start of the season. He got shelled. And I don't know why. I'm just looking at this unowned Cincinnati team thinking there's potential here in this spot.
Yeah, Gausman has given up 18 stolen bases to just one caught stealing. So 18 for 19 are base stealers. Last year, they were 21 for 25. So, guys with speed, guys with steal bases have had a lot of success against him. Obviously, that's the main guy, Elly De La Cruz, who, of course, lapping the field kind of in stolen bases on the season. I think it's a really, really good spot for Elly De La Cruz. Gausman, even when he's on his game, gives up his fair share of home runs, especially to left-handed hitters, which is Ellie's strong side. I like Jonathan India a little bit in the one hole as well. He's got some speed, has swung the bat pretty well this year in general. As Jacob Stubb says, the Reds are shit. That is kind of true.
Yeah.
And I'm not really, I don't think, going to go for many full-on red stacks, playing my normal 5 lineups tonight. But India and De La Cruz are two that I wanted to make sure not to overlook. Friedel, Fraley, swinging from the left side, both have some speed. I think those guys are okay. But it is the top 2 guys for the Reds that are most enticing to me. And then on the Blue Jays side, looking into Julian Aguilar a little bit, he had some pretty extreme righty-lefty splits in the minor leagues this season. He was a full starter. I mean, I think he threw over 90 pitches in his last AAA start, or close to it anyway. Is on full rest here. So I do think the Reds' plan, or their hope anyway, is for him to be a normal, 5-inning starter if he can do it. No, obviously, no guarantee that he can, but I think that's probably at least the plan for the Reds, which does make me like these Blue Jays bats a little bit. One guy that stands out, Will Wagner, second base. He's 2,400. Was really swinging it well, got traded over to the Blue Jays, I believe from the Astros, and has really performed well. Small sample size, but ever since he got traded over, AAA was tearing the cover off the ball to call him up, and he swung a good bat so far as well at the big league level. So Will Wagner won a value bat that I'm looking at. Anything else for you, JT, in Cincinnati and Toronto here?
No, it's not a primary spot for me, but it's more of an interesting spot to be a little bit different on this 9-game slate.
Yeah, makes sense. Baltimore and the New York Mets are up next. David Peterson going for the Mets, throwing from the left side. Has pitched well this year. Hasn't had a bad start in like 6 or 7 outings. I think personally pitching a little bit above his head. I'm not a really big believer in his talent. I think he's gotten some good fortune going his way. Has pitched okay, but for me, not really in play against the Orioles here. And then fellow lefty Trevor Rogers will make the start for the Orioles. Traded over from the Miami Marlins at the trade deadline. Wasn't pitching well for them, and arguably has pitched even worse for the Orioles. Underlying metrics kind of back that up. I did not understand this trade when it happened for the Orioles. I just didn't see anything in Trevor Rogers. I thought maybe the Orioles might have saw something, right, that they could change and kind of turn his career season around. But at least so far, you've got to say that really hasn't worked at all. So wind blowing in, I think, in New York tonight holds me back a little bit from the right-handed power from the Mets is what I'm kind of really looking at here. But I still think I'm willing to pull the trigger. I mean, Lindor, Vientos, JD, Alonso, they got Starling Marte back in there. He hits lefties pretty well. Bader down there, Tyrone Taylor. I mean, a lot of guys, right, that can hit lefties well. And Rogers has been blasted by right-handed hitters for a couple of years now. So this looks like a good spot to me for these Mets bats. Really, the whole lineup, I think, is pretty solid. And I don't mind going to some Orioles as well. I'm on the offense in this game, total of 9. What are you doing with Mets and Orioles?
Yeah, I'm off on both pitchers. I'm not going to be using Rogers or Peterson here.
Yeah.
Peterson, very short leash, particularly when he gets into any sort of trouble. What was interesting over the weekend is I think it was Jose Quintana's start. right? This bullpen mediocrity for the Mets, and maybe even worse than mediocre recently, is really seems to even have gotten into Carlos Mendoza's head, as he refused to take Quintana out of the game and use his bullpen, and Quintana just got torched in that start. And what stands out to me here is two bullpens that have been bad lately, really bad all season when you consider the Mets, some of the injuries they suffered earlier in the year. Ottavino has just been terrible, continues to just put runners on base and then give up big home runs. And of course, we know all about what the Orioles tried to do with their pitching staff. And like you said, it really hasn't worked out yet. So I think this is an interesting spot for both sides, maybe more so the Mets. You mentioned them getting Starling Marte back. The Orioles, very frustrating weekend for me. I played a lot of Corbin Burns the night that the Red Sox went off, and pretty disgusting to see the rest of these Orioles starters, Zach Eflin, Cade Povich, and Robert Suarez, basically like no hit the Red Sox, but give up, Corbin Burns gives up 21 runs to cost me quite a bit of money on Thursday night. But yeah, I think the offense here in this game is interesting to me. I'll definitely have pieces of both of these offenses. And Pete Alonso, a lot of people, making fun of him earlier in the season. The All-Star game is his whole season. He's come to life recently. He's been hitting the ball very hard. He's been hitting the ball out of the ballpark. And he gets a really, really good matchup here with a fly ball pitcher in Trevor Rogers. So that's interesting to me.
Yeah, some minor weather concerns in New York. There are kind of storms, pop-up storms in and around the area. It's hot, it's humid. I do think it should be fine, but it is something to keep an eye on.
Pop-up storm's fine for the offense as long as, we're not on the pitchers here, right? So, in fact, go ahead, give me a thunderstorm in the third inning, and let's see what happens. Just be careful on both sides, though, right? Because you've got guys like Tyrone Taylor that you mentioned. He's going to come out if a righty comes in the game, likely. Same thing with a couple of guys, O'Hearn on the Orioles side.
I believe Nimmo is going to be out tonight. I think he got an MRI, so they are probably short one guy on the bench there. It does help for some of the pinch hit risk for the Mets. And the wind direction, I've seen differing reports on what is going to be the direction at the time of the game. But I will be keeping an eye on that because I do think it matters for especially the Mets' righty power is what I'm really on. And most of those home runs would be going out to left field if they do happen against Trevor Rogers. So I will be keeping an eye on that total and the wind direction as we get closer to the lock here. Pittsburgh and Texas up next, 8.5 total. In this one, it is in Arlington. Dane Dunning going to be pitching for Texas. He's been not great, especially recently, not throwing a ton of pitches. He did get up to 76 last time out against Boston, so I suppose 80 plus is possible, but he really hasn't pitched well. He seems to be, from what I can gather, even losing steam and kind of, just not pitching very well right now, Dane Dunning. I don't really think he's in play even against Pittsburgh at home. And then Luis Ortiz going for Pittsburgh. He has been pretty lucky as well. Actually had really good results at the beginning of the year, but since they moved into the starting rotation, it's been kind of a rough ride for Luis Ortiz, who does have good stuff, but, doesn't really know where it's going. The command isn't there. And has gotten hit really hard by lefties over the course of his brief MLB career. Do you think guys like Seager, Smith, Nathaniel Lowe profile really well against him, swinging from the left side for the Rangers? Pittsburgh side, I think Reynolds, Cruz are okay plays, but they're really expensive and I think kind of hard to get to tonight. We'll throw it over to you, JT. I'm not going to have a ton from this game, I don't think, but what are you doing with Rangers and Pirates?
Yeah. So have we seen the Dane time GIF yet in Discord?
I don't think so.
It was a late in the day decision that Dunning was going to start and not Jose Urena. And I'll start there. I still have no idea, and I don't think anyone does, if this is a Dunning start or if instead of Urena starting, it's going to be Dunning and then Urena, and it's still going to remain the same piggyback because the piggyback with Urena going first wasn't working too well. He would give up runs. Dane Dunning would come in and get smashed, and maybe they're trying to switch the mojo up by bringing stunning in first. So
they'll both get smashed again, regardless of what the order.
no Dame time for me on this slate. And you mentioned Luis Ortiz, last 3 starts, 149 average on batted balls in play, 71% of base runners left on base. The problem is the Rangers just haven't hit at all. I mean, I feel like they're coming out of it, but I felt like they're coming out of it for the last week now, and they really haven't had that big game. One thing I will say is this Pirates bullpen has been shaky of late, and so I'll take some shots here on Texas. Not a huge fan of full stacks with the Pirates. They do have, of course, they have O'Neal Cruz in there. You mentioned Brian Reynolds, but they are priced up. So fine with some mini stacks of these Pirates if they land in my pool. But I think for me, I'm gonna definitely try and have some Texas. None of the pitchers.
Makes sense. It's Pittsburgh and Texas. Let's get to Boston and Houston up next. This one in Houston is going to be Tanner Houck pitching for the Red Sox. Obviously, right-hander with some pretty big splits, much more effective against same-handed hitters. And then Yusei Kikuchi, traded over from Toronto to Houston at the trade deadline, has pitched well for the Astros so far. Obviously has had quite a few good runs of pitching throughout his career. A volatile guy, both in Seattle and in Toronto. I think that's just kind of who he is, and it's going to continue. But he is a guy who can rack up strikeouts when he's on his game. I do think Houston in general definitely knows what they're doing with pitchers. I would expect him to maybe get a little bit better moving from Toronto to Houston just overall. And this Red Sox team, yes, they have some dangerous bats. They also have pretty high strikeout rates against left-handed pitching. So I think Kikuchi looks pretty good here to me. He's going to get some ownership, it looks like. We just talked about, was he in the top 4 in terms of ownership? I'm pulling it up now.
Yeah. I think he's second.
Second, 35%. I think that makes sense. I think Kikuchi does have quite a bit of upside here. The floor isn't real high, but I'm more worried about the upside anyway, and I do think Kikuchi has that. And then I think Tanner Houck is a little bit interesting as a contrarian option. Sabres got him at 3% owned. I assume it'll be at least a little higher than that, but no Alex Bregman. And outside of Jordan Alvarez, the Astros don't really have any good left-handed hitters. The only other 2 lefties in the lineup are Caratini, a switch hitter, and Trey Cabbage. So it is mostly right-handed bats. And Houck has been very good at suppressing really everything from right-handed hitters. I think potential pitchers duel here, maybe more than people think. And I like both these guys. So it won't be a ton of offense here for me. What about you, JT? Boston and Houston?
Chalk Yusei Kikuchi.
Yeah.
He's just, look, the numbers all season long have suggested that no matter what slate he's pitched on, he's been numerically, statistically, the top or the second best or the third best option. And that's the same thing here. By the numbers, if you take out Zebby Matthews as one start, he's the top option. The strikeout prop is high.
Yeah.
What concerns me about this is the books are a little low on his length here, and he's been great, but maybe a little bit lucky in terms of his ability to strand runners. And I think the Red Sox present the best leverage spot on this slate. It doesn't mean that I'm not going to play Kikuchi. I'm just talking in terms I'm playing 150 lineups tonight, and the Red Sox are definitely going to be in there. I'm probably going to be under the field on Kikuchi. I think he's a guy, DC, that the public gets wrong a lot. And his biggest starts are when nobody's on him. I think it's worked out maybe once or twice this season when he's been fairly popular. He's been okay. But the biggest issue with him is his control. And I remember when he got to Toronto, people, he's going to be different. And he was different, his velocity's up. He's just not consistent. And so when you look at an inconsistent pitcher being the second highest owned pitcher on the slate, granted, I talked already about what Cade Povich did to the Red Sox on, I think it was Saturday night. So it's possible that he could pitch well. I think the Red Sox present some very, very interesting leverage here. So I'll have under the field Kikuchi. I will have definitely some Red Sox. Tanner Huck, for me, the strikeouts don't seem to have been there. He seems to really have regressed since that strong start earlier in the season. But you mentioned the one factor that's in play here. Kind of a dullish park and a little bit of a watered down Houston lineup. We did see, as I mentioned in Discord yesterday, kind of jokingly, Kai Busch shut down the Houston Astros. They have been worse against left-handed pitching. But I think he's a little bit interesting, as you mentioned, as a contrarian play. He's not a guy that I'm flag planting on, though, right? If he ends up in a little bit more than the field of my lineups, I'll be fine with that.
Yeah, I mean, how can it be very low owned? The game log watchers certainly aren't going to be able to click on Tanner Houck. It's been 5 bad to mediocre starts in a row for him. He does still seem to be the same pitcher that was having some awesome starts early and into the middle part of the season. So it's mostly an ownership play, frankly, with Tanner Houck, just the super low ownership, reasonable price point, and not that strong of a pitching slate, right? Like you're going to get, Kikuchi 10 times as owned as Houck is. And I mean, I think Houck beats him, 30 or 40% of the time, something like that. So it is kind of a leverage play there. My 5 teams I'll have, I think, probably either 1 share or 2 shares of Kikuchi. So either kind of right at the field or just below. Not going to be a stand player for me. I do want to get some exposure because I'm with you on the, like as a chalk pitcher, he's as likely to bust as anybody. But I do think, 10 plus strikeouts, if he's on his game, is certainly in play. I do think he's one of the few pitchers who could break the slate. But I'm with you on, those Red Sox bats. Any Red Sox bats in particular you like? I think Tyler O'Neill kind of stands out to me, swinging from the right side there.
I'm going to full stack. The thing with Kikuchi is, at least in the past, it wasn't like he was a completely shut down pitcher to left-handed batters. So you have guys like Duran and Rafael Devers. I haven't looked at the lineups here in the last couple of minutes, but if Ref Snyder's in there, I think we think of Ref Snyder as this Yankee cast-off who kind of sucks. He's actually been kind of good this year, and in particular against left-handed pitching. Right. So if you're stacking the Red Sox, I would not remove him from those stacks.
Yeah, agreed with that. Even like a Romy Gonzalez has actually swung it well against lefties. So I get it with the Red Sox leverage there. I think that's a pretty good move at what will be very, very low ownership.
Ref Snyder hitting third, says Steve. So yeah, I think he's interesting.
Absolutely. Jordan Alvarez is really the only guy I would want against Tanner Houck if you're trying to play that the other side. Not really interested in the Astros overall myself. Brings us to the LA Angels and the Royals. This one in Kansas City. Pretty typical weather, warm, humid, slight winds blowing in. The Royals do have, I believe, the highest team total on the slate, sitting around 5.5 currently against Carson Fulmer and a very bad LA Angels bullpen. We know the Royals feel like they've broken as many slates as just about anybody, of course, led by Bobby Witt, who's been fantastic and should continue to be. And then Seth Lugo pitching for the Royals. 9,500 for Lugo sure feels like a lot to me, even in what is undoubtedly a pretty strong matchup here against this Angels lineup. Curious where you stand on Lugo. I assume you have no interest in Fulmer. And then what are you doing with the Royals? Because I do think they're going to come in as the one of, if not the most popular stacks on this slate.
Yeah, so let me start with Seth Lugo because I think he is perhaps one of the more interesting talking points at pitching tonight. You mentioned 9,500 on DraftKings. He's been overpriced all year, DC, right? I mean, and I remember earlier this season, he's been having these great games, 8 innings, 7 innings, 5-6 strikeouts, not giving up any runs. And you're thinking this has to end. And it has. His last 3-4 starts have been terrible. But at 9,500, after a few bad starts, you get the Angels coming into town. Angels not hitting right-handed pitching at all, striking out quite a bit. I think Lugo has perhaps the best chance of any pitcher on this slate to pitch into the 8th inning. And in a game that the Royals are expected to win, in a game where their offense should have some success here, I think Seth Lugo is really interesting at that low ownership. I think he's an interesting, it's not pay up to be contrarian. He's expensive, but I just think he has perhaps the highest inning ceiling of any pitcher on this slate. So that's how I feel about Seth Lugo, which means I'm not playing any Angels. I'm probably going to X the Angels completely, not worried about it. I understand that the Royals bullpen is terrible. If I'm right about Lugo, I don't think we see more than an inning, if that, out of the Royals bullpen. The Royals themselves, as the highest owned team on the slate, it's a 9-game slate. Looks like the ownership collectively on the stack is still only going to be in the 10 to 15% range. However, guys like Bobby Witt, Pasquantino, maybe Perez are going to be extremely highly owned. You can't, on 9-game slates, fade those guys because we have seen Bobby Witt at 40 and 50% ownership hit 2 home runs and steal 3 bases.
Yeah.
And I'm fine with eating the ownership in my 150. I don't know if I'm going to get there on a single, like I am playing the single entry tonight. Now you're talking about probably 50, 60% ownership of some of these guys in that single entry contest on DraftKings. I think there it makes sense to fade, but it also would make sense to play Witt as a one-off. So I'm definitely not going to full stack the Royals in that one, but I'm going to have plenty of Royals. I'm going to allow more of them as 2-man stacks just because I think it's pretty likely that 2 of these guys are going to put up ceiling type performances that you may need to take down a tournament.
Yeah, I like it. And yeah, looking at this Angels lineup, which we do have, I mean, there's not really anybody that you're all that scared of, to be honest, right? And including some, just a good spot for Lugo. I mean, AP said it. He wrote the playbook today. He's our resident Royals guy. Perfect matchup for Lugo. Our guy, Uncle T, in on Lugo as well. Sounds like you like Lugo. And, I was kind of neutral-ish on him, but –
And just to be clear, I hadn't even gotten to the point of looking at, and I generally don't do it as much anymore, looking at what a pitcher has done against a team previously, because even the Angels that he faced earlier in the season, it's a completely different team. So it's none of that. It's just simply the fact that it's a bad team. I don't think Lugo's as bad as I think he's had some difficult matchups too. I think Minnesota was one of those in there, really, really difficult team, which we'll talk about when we get to what sounds like your favorite pitcher of the night. But it's just in terms of looking at these pitchers, and we'll get to a couple where I think that are going to be popular, and there may be some red flags, right? Lugo is not one of those. Royals are in playoff contention. They they got a great outing from Brady Singer yesterday, but certainly any opportunity to not have that bullpen in the game, they're going to take advantage of. And I think this is one of those spots for Seth Lugo.
Yeah, I mean, if they're up, 5-0 or 6-1, they'll ride Lugo deep into the game as they can, right? And I mean, they'll let him. You could throw a complete game here, just pounded strikes and chance that the Angels can't get anything done. So I'm with you. I'm going to get make sure I'm over the field on Seth Lugo. I kind of like that call,
which won't be hard. He's in the single digits. I think he's.
Yeah, Sabres got him at 15, but even that is totally fine. And I wouldn't be surprised if it came in even a little bit under that when it's all said and done. That moves us from Royals and Angels to Rays and Athletics. Up next, this one in Oakland. Taj Bradley pitching for Tampa Rays. He's one of the 4, the core 4 that we think are going to be the highest owned. Bradley, Sabres got currently at 34% owned. He's 9K. You certainly understand the, enthusiasm for Bradley given the matchup with the A's, who do have really, really high strikeout rates throughout their lineup. Obviously, a pretty good place to pitch. So I like Taj Bradley a little bit here. I think, I actually think I have him third behind King and Kikuchi. And now maybe Lugo as well. You guys kind of talked me into him a little bit. So I think I'll probably end up under on Taj Bradley, but I don't mind at all the matchup here. I don't think he's a bad play by any means. But it's actually the pitcher on the other side of this game that I'm more excited about, JT. Joe Boyle for the A's. I like a lot here. I can't remember if it was who was on the show with me before the last time Joe Boyle pitched. He was called up. He pitched back in April and May, right, and was absolutely abysmal. I think he spent a little bit of time on the injured list. The A's built him back up and then called him up for that last start on the 13th against the Mets, which on paper did not go very well. But if you look behind the numbers a little bit, dig into it, really some encouraging signs with Joe Boyle in that start. You know, the first pitch strike rate, swinging strike rate, ability to throw strikes overall, all looked good for Joe Boyle. But by far the bigger thing is, I mean, if it holds a complete change in his pitch mix, he went just to 2 pitches. He dished his curveball, so all slider fastball, which normally is not a great recipe for success for, you usually need more than 2 pitches. But his velocity, JT, was way up. He held 99.2 miles per hour through 85 pitches in that start against the Mets. Nasty slider. I mentioned it before his last start. He got called up from AAA. His last 4 or 5 starts in AAA were 9, 10, 11 strikeouts, just mowing everybody down with this increased velocity. You give me this Rays team that has, a lot of swing and miss in it. It doesn't have many dangerous left-handed bats, right? You got Brandon Lowe, Josh Lowe. Other than that, not a lot of bats to fear here. At home, 7K, throwing gas, and what looks like 10% ownership or something. I really, really like Joe Boyle here. Curious if you looked into him much, but gonna have a tough time talking me out of this one. But go ahead and try if you want, JT.
Well, let me start with a general comment. Remember when we thought the Tampa Bay Rays organization was genius?
Yeah.
And you see them now, and it's just they're embarrassing. They're embarrassing. So I'll start with Taj Bradley here. It's not as good a matchup over the course of, let's say, the last 30 days or even the last 2 weeks. A's striking out right about 19%. Taj, when he's on, can be matchup proof. But I think, as everyone will know, anyone who has heard me talk about the Rays pitchers in Discord, it's hard for me always to play a popular Tampa Bay Rays pitcher at an elevated price tag. It's even more so difficult for me to play him today because of not so much what we are going to see from the Rays, but I'll get to that. It's just that time of the season, and we heard this last night from the Detroit Tigers manager, AJ Hinch, who said, hey, Tarek Skubal, yep, he's in the Cy Young conversation, but we're not going to make the playoffs. You're going to see his workload monitored. And I feel the same way about these Rays pitchers. They're not really in the playoff contention mix. They made a somewhat ridiculous decision to bring Drew Rasmussen back and use him as an opener. And I have significant workload concerns about Taj Bradley. I don't think it's going to matter if he's pitching well or if he's pitching poorly. There's a number of pitches they have in mind. And so I think if he does get to a ceiling game, he's going to have to do it in 5 innings. Maybe he gets a 6th inning, but I don't think he'll get any more than that, which at that price point, I'd rather play Seth Lugo for a quarter of the ownership.
Yeah.
Doesn't mean I love the A's. I really don't like offense in this game. But I've got Joe Boyle pegged for positive regression here based on the numbers that you saw. I thought about playing him in that Mets start, and it was a couple of things that kept me off him. But like you, I really liked what I saw. And this is a free swinging Rays team. There's some power. You mentioned the Lowe brothers in there, right? But 7K, 7K, I'm all in on Joe Boyle. I'm going to be at least 4.
That's JT.
I'm going to be at least 4 or 5 times the field.
Yeah.
And I may X Taj Bradley here. It may be a mistake. He may pitch well, but I would rather spend that money on pitchers where I think they have a ceiling in terms of innings. So if I leave him, I'm going to be under the field.
Absolutely love it with Joe Boyle. I'll be riding that train, and Bowden Francis came through again. This Joe Boyle thing has a lot of similarities to the Bowden Francis, where he sucked early in the season. He goes back down. He works on some things. He changes the pitch mix, and he comes back up and he pitches well. Joe Boyle has way better stuff than Bowden Francis did. Listen, obviously no guarantees with anything, but I mean, this is one that I'm kind of excited about, right? I'm excited to see him pitch. You know, if he comes out and he's throwing 95, 94, 95, I will regret all the Boyle shares that I'm going to have. But if it's the 99 to 100, like, he's got a chance to rack up.
Well, you got something else going here, though, right? So the Rays play an extra inning game yesterday, and they have to get on the plane. They travel to Oakland. The start's a little bit earlier out there. I think it's a 6:38 start Pacific, right? I think there are some factors other than his talent, other than the fact that we've seen some real improvement from him.
Yeah.
Other than the fact that the market is high on him. You've got the stadium as well. And the A's have some momentum here. So I like it for a number of reasons.
Yeah, the biggest worry is just hoping he can throw strikes, right? That's kind of the probably his downfall if it does come to that. But absolutely love Joe Boyle, and JT and I will be riding with him quite a bit tonight. Let's get to Minnesota and San Diego up next. This one, of course, in San Diego, Pitchers Park here. Looks like standard weather for San Diego. Some wind's blowing in, too. We've got Twins rookie Zebby Matthews pitching for the Twins. Was pretty good in that first start. Had been, just, frankly, a lot of his minor league starts were kind of like this one. No walks, good number of strikeouts, very little damage. He had allowed almost nothing in the minor leagues this year. I talked about kind of wanting to play him even against the Royals that last time out, but couldn't do it with the $7,700 price tag. And I don't think I could do it tonight either. But I have enough respect for Matthews and the Twins bullpen. I'm not really on the Padres whatsoever here. And then Michael King going for San Diego. I do believe he'll be the most popular pitcher tonight. He's been fantastic all year long. It's, I think, a pretty solid matchup here against the Twins. Decent amount of strikeouts. Some dangerous bats. Not a completely clean matchup, but I think a good enough one, at least in my eyes, to justify King as the highest owned pitcher on the slate. I don't love paying the highest price for the highest owned pitcher. It's not my favorite in MLB DFS, but I do think in this spot, he's probably worth it. Curious where you stand on Michael King, and then any bats in this game you're going to, because for me, I really don't think I'm playing any bats at all here in my 5 lineups.
Yeah, I would say I'm not high on either offense. And, King, he's even been unlucky in terms of the batted ball and play average, at least these last 3 starts when he's been coming off an outstanding start. The concern I have, DC, is the lack of strikeouts in the Minnesota lineup. And lately there have been very few strikeouts in that lineup. So I don't think I'm going to get to field level on Michael King. We talked about Lugo, who I like a lot. We talked about Joe Boyle, who I like a lot. There's another lower price pitcher that I like quite a bit that we're going to get to here in a minute. And like I said, I like both sides of the Cincinnati-Gausman matchup. So I think, Gausman's another guy for cheaper that I'm going to take some shots on. So I'll have Michael King. I am a little bit concerned about the lack of strikeouts. And without the strikeouts, you start to wonder if he's going to get bit by that batted ball in play, where he's been lucky in terms of those runners not scoring. Is that going to go the other way, where he's been surviving based on his strikeout rate? And all of a sudden you face a team that doesn't strike out a whole lot. And now it becomes a little bit more of a challenge, because he's had some bad games in his last 5 or 6 games, even when he's been pitching fairly well. So that's kind of my thoughts as far as offense. Like you said, not a whole lot of interest. I'll probably leave them in the pool for minis. Stephen Kreitson says Bill Miller is behind the plate, as does Uncle T.
Yeah.
Certainly can help. Obviously, with the strikeouts, you're gonna have that bigger zone. But yeah, I think there's so much more to that than just who the umpire is behind the plate. So as far as Matthews, 7-7, against a team that doesn't strike out a lot, right? So his K prop is sitting at 3.5. It's— I don't think, and we know it's Minnesota, right? So same thing as Tampa Bay. It's like they have a certain number of pitches in mind. He could be in the middle of a no-hitter, and once he reaches that pitch, Rocco Baldelli is going to be sprinting out to the mound. So, no, thank you.
Yeah, I can't play Zebby either. I do think he's going to be good, though, and I will play him if he gets a clean matchup coming up here and he's throwing around 80 pitches. I might jump on the Zebby train, but can't do it tonight.
Yep.
Yeah, and of course Bill Miller behind the plate, of course, helps the pitching. And yeah, I think I am a little bit higher on UR than Michael King. I just really believe in him as an arm right now. Watching him pitch, I mean, he looks nasty out there. I think more often than not, he's putting up 20+ fantasy points in this one. So I get it with the price and the ownership, but I do fully expect a Michael King strong performance here. Last two games to talk about. We go to San Francisco for the Giants and the Chicago White Sox. Going to be Jonathan Cannon running back out there for the White Sox. Has not generally gone very well for him outside of that very first start, but does have an okay matchup here. Not a ton of left-handed power, which is the big danger spot for Cannon on the Giants. And then Kyle Harrison going for San Francisco. I don't really think Harrison is all that good, but he is at home in San Francisco against this White Sox team. He's 7,900. They let him throw a decent number of pitches most times out. I don't really want to play Harrison, JT, but I feel like at 7,900 and 10 to 15% ownership against the White Sox, I feel like it's almost got to be a good play. Very curious where you stand on Harrison and any bats you're going to here. Obviously not the most enticing spot, but two pretty mediocre pitchers, so maybe some low-owned gems. What are you doing with the Giants and the White Sox?
Yeah, the park itself, I think, is the biggest detriment to offense here, right? I mean, even in great matchups, you've seen. I mean, it's a better park during the day in the afternoon, than it is at night. At night, it's just not a great park at all. But that doesn't mean that I'm itching to play Harrison or Jonathan Cannon. I'll start with Harrison. He has, been good against bad teams, right? Generally, he's been really good against Colorado. The White Sox have shown a little bit of life recently, but they have a massive strikeout rate against left-handed pitching, and you have the park advantage. I'm fine with field level Harrison. He's not a flag plant for me. Much higher, I would say, on Joe Boyle.
Yeah.
And I don't think this is the slate for Jonathan Cannon. I think Jonathan Cannon has the potential to be a decent major league pitcher, like a number 3 starter, where for DFS purposes, he'll be relevant in the right matchups. It's not a bad matchup here. I just think there's not enough upside in him for this slate. I think the other pitchers, there are other cheaper pitchers that I would rather play than Jonathan Cannon tonight. But I think he pitches fine here, and so I'm not really interested in Giants full stacks. I haven't decided whether or not I'm going to take them out of the pool, but I'll leave the Giants minis in. Obviously, we know about the White Sox bullpen, but again, the park is a significant factor here. So I'm going to be much lower on the offenses here.
Yeah, looking at that projected Giants lineup, I think it's possible Cannon pitches well against this team. And I mean, it does seem like the White Sox, kind of in contrast to the Rays and some other team, the Twins, who are super cautious with their pitchers. I mean, the White Sox don't have anything other to do than find out if Jonathan Cannon is the rotation piece for next year. He's throwing 90+ pitches in 6 consecutive games.
They're trying to develop him, as opposed to whatever the Rays and whatever this whole, it's craziness that they I think they think their arms are going to break off if they throw more than 85 pitches. So. And I think they like what they've seen so far from Cannon. He's been good. He's been good in bad matchups. He's been okay in some of the more difficult ones, and he's gotten hit around when he's played really, really good teams. That's what you expect from a rookie pitcher that comes up without a lot of fanfare.
What's his ownership, Cannon? It's super low.
I don't think he's going to be owned at all.
2% saver stat. I mean, he's definitely a good play at 2% owned.
I just think there are other guys with a higher ceiling
for sure
at right around that same price point, right? Maybe a little bit higher.
Yeah. I think he'll probably end up with a share of Cannon on my 5 teams. Obviously, the low price tag goes along with that.
Right.
Yeah. Last game on the slate, Seattle and the LA Dodgers. Brian Wu going for Seattle. Always got to mention the home and away stuff when it comes to these Seattle starters. Wu has to go on the road here, and like the rest of them, just has not been nearly as effective when on the road. Did pitch well in Detroit last time out, but that's Detroit. Different story here. Going to face this Dodgers team who, excuse me, I think we'll get Freddie Freeman back here. So dangerous spot for Brian Wu. I think the Dodgers, they're big guys. Ohtani, Betts, Freeman, if he's in there, I think they are interesting contrarian plays against Wu. And then Gavin Stone, who I think will get. Doesn't look like a lot of ownership, I guess. But yeah, 7,500 for him. The strikeouts mostly haven't been there for Stone, but of course he gets this Mariners team who we like to pick on more so in Seattle, but I'll still consider Stone here against this Mariners team, just a team that obviously just has been pretty pitiful offensively for nearly the entire season. Curious what you're doing here, JT, with Dodgers and Mariners.
Yeah. Kid Lightning says Freeman is out again tonight.
Yeah, I think I got that wrong. I think he's out.
Yeah. So obviously that makes the Dodgers stack a lot more difficult because you're relying on, some platoon guys there that are automatically going to come out of the game as soon as Brian Wu leaves or shortly thereafter. I guess they have Saucedo, maybe the only lefty in the Mariners whooping. They may have one more as well. I like the Dodgers minis. The pitcher I like in this game is Gavin Stone, though. He was really good earlier in the season. Oh, Max Muncy is back. All right, well that's interesting. Gavin Stone really good earlier in the season. Hit a rough stretch. Seemed to bounce back a little bit his last start. And I think his last start may have been, was it at Oakland or San Francisco? One of those teams. Pitched quite well. And I like him here. 7,500 against the swing and miss tendencies of the Seattle Mariner team. I mean, DC, could you have constructed a worse offense in terms of consistency, in terms of putting the ball in play? Tommy Edman in the lineup. So now the Dodgers lineup is actually significantly stronger with Muncy and Edman. So I guess I take that back. You can do 5-mans of them, and I like 5-mans of them. But I like Gavin Stone here. I'm showing about 9, maybe 10% ownership on him. I'll probably be double the field here. We have seen massive games from respectable and up pitchers against this Seattle team. The park here is a downgrade as well. Not that they were playing in a great park at PNC, but they come across the country as well for a Monday night game. So give me Gavin Stone, give me the Dodgers, mostly completely off the Seattle Mariners, and definitely am not playing Brian Wu in this matchup.
Yeah, we're definitely on the same page with Seattle and Dodgers, all Dodgers for both of us. And I don't know if I need to mention it every show, but once again, I do think Ohtani, perhaps the strongest overall one-off on this entire slate.
Not Bobby Witt, Ohtani.
I think so.
All right.
Given the way lower ownership.
All right, that's fair. That's fair.
All right, that is all 9 games. Let's get to stacks, pitching, home runs, and favorite plays. JT, your favorite stack and favorite contrarian stack.
Oh, man. So my favorite stack here is probably, and I'm somewhat biased because they've won me a really quite a bit of money this season. Think the O's are going to break out against Peterson. At least right now, I'm thinking that I like the Orioles quite a bit. So they would be my maybe my favorite stack here. Could change. And then under the radar, I'm still showing low ownership on the Dodgers. So if the Dodgers are going to be contrarian against Wu and a bullpen that has been very shaky of late, Dodgers get a couple of healthy guys coming back, Max Muncy and Edman, huge upgrades for that lineup. I will take the Dodgers as a contrarian lineup.
I like that. I like both those offenses quite a bit. My favorite stack will be the Mets tonight against the lefty Trevor Rogers. I love the Mets against bad left-handed pitchers, and certainly Rogers qualifies for that description. So the Mets is my favorite stack, favorite contrarian stack. I do like your Dodgers call. I'll go with the Reds, particularly the top two guys, India, De La Cruz. You can mix in Stevenson, Friedel, Steer, Candelario. A lot of cheap bats near the bottom of the lineup. Gausman gets up power. He gets up speed. The Reds got, the away with the full 9 innings. I think they have a lot of downside for sure, but also I think if they go off, it's some big numbers out of these Reds bats. So they'll be my contrarian pick today. JT, your most important pitcher on this slate. Who do you think you'll be most overweight on?
Yeah, I think I'm going to need Seth Lugo to do exactly what I talked about here, which is go into the 7th or 8th inning, give up 2 runs or less, and for the Royals to win the game. Lugo is going to be the pitcher that I am most heavily exposed to above where the field is.
Yeah, I like that. I'm trying to get over on Lugo as well. Easy pick for me tonight, though. Joe Boyle going to be on the majority of my lineups. Electric arm. Hopefully he can keep it going or maintain. I know the results weren't great, but the stuff at least from his last start against the Mets. Really like his chances for a truly big outing tonight. Joe Boyle, obviously some risk with the inexperience and all that. Home run call tonight, JT. Who's going yard?
You know what? Gunnar Henderson.
I like that call. I'm going to go with another high-priced shortstop, Corey Seager, off of Luis Ortiz in that Pirates 10. Finally, your favorite hitter on this slate, JT?
He's going to be popular, DC, but I just cannot. I can't get away from playing Bobby Witt. He's burned us too many times at 30, 40, 50% ownership. I think it'll be a little bit lower than that tonight, but Angels travel, hit the road. Don't think it's going to be a good night for the Angels.
I was going to name Ellie here, but we can't go Henderson, Seager.
We can't name first. What? Well, we have to go someone else.
It's not very helpful. So I got to go a different direction. Can't name a fourth, 6K shortstop here.
Yeah, it's true.
So I will go completely.
Loaded position. It's a loaded position.
So, Will Wagner hitting 6th for the Blue Jays today, swinging from the left side against Julian Aguilar. I think he gets a home run for us, so he'll qualify for both of those questions. That'll do it for us. Fun show as always here on Monday afternoon. Appreciate all you guys watching. Hit the like button on your way out if you haven't yet done so. This show will be back at the normal time tomorrow, 4:45 Eastern time. Till then, he's JT. I'm Draft Chief. We're out of here.